More noise. He deserves a little more than that.
Hello.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for being here today at HorrorCon. My name is Mark Moore. I'm the owner of Midnight Society Media and media guy for this guy, Sean Cassidy. Today we're gonna go over the life, we're gonna talk a little bit about the lore, and definitely celebrate the legacy of Ted Cassidy. And thank you especially for joining us today in the 60th anniversary of the original Addams Family television series. So without further ado, I'm gonna hand it over to Sean to tell us a little bit about himself and his father, Ted Cassidy.
Well, Dad started out as a radio DJ, actually, before I can even remember, in Florida, and we moved to Dallas. And Dad was one of the first reporters on the JFK assassination. So his name kind of hit the spotlight even when he was in radio. And in 1964, he got the part, and we moved to Hollywood, and things went that way. So an interesting story about how he got the job. As he told me, the part had actually mostly been cast, and I believe it was Abe Vigoda from, what was that show? Barney Miller, Abe Vigoda. He was cast as Lurch, and my father's sister, my Aunt Carol, was a stewardess for TWA, and she was on a layover in Hawaii, and just by chance met the casting director for the Addams Family. They got into a conversation. Oh, my brother acts and he's tall. And he said, well, what the hey, why don't you have him come in for an audition? And he did, and he killed it. You may have heard that the original Lurch in the Charles Addams cartoons was a stiff lamp post of a character. He had no lines, he had no stories, he was just sort of scenery. And when they pulled that rope for Dad to walk in his first audition scene, he gave the iconic, "You rang," and the rest is history. The place broke up, they loved that line, they wrote stories for him, they gave him lines, he became a real character and mover in the story of the Addams Family. So I love that he went from nowhere to an overnight sensation and created a character which, you know, we all love to this day. I take a lot of pride in that, love my dad for that.
Absolutely, iconic, especially the line, "You rang." Got t-shirts of it at the booth. Ladies and gentlemen, this is Sean Cassidy, son of Lurch. You can visit our booth up near the front. We've got t-shirts.
Right down this aisle. Yeah.
We'll be taking photos, signing autographs, and telling many more stories. One of my favorites, and we gotta kind of jump around here a little bit. Ted wasn't from a very well-known city, was he? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, small town in West Virginia, Philippi, West Virginia. Population, I think today it's 2,800. It was probably less then. And he grew up there in a small town, West Virginia, in the 40s. And he was this big guy. I think he reached 6'1" when he was 12 years old. So he kind of felt like a freak, and people kind of treated him that way. And he was always worried that I would feel that way. But my father was always taller than me, and I grew up in Los Angeles, so I didn't have any of that. Anyway, the town loves Dad in Philippi, and we just came from a couple of months ago from Lurch Fest, a festival dedicated to Lurch and my father in Philippi, West Virginia. That was so fun. Imagine a festival dedicated to your father. It was so cool.
So are there people that live there that still remember your dad?
Oh yeah, they're somewhat the older set, but yeah. It is amazing to me how many people came up to me and said their mother or their grandmother dated or went to the prom with my dad. Apparently he was a very busy teenager, but I never heard that from him.
Well, everybody wants to, kind of be part of the legacy, Ted Cassidy.
Right, we got to rub off some way. He's their favorite son. Yeah.
Right. Very rich legacy. I'd love to jump forward. I think what everybody wants to know, and especially me, my favorite stories come from the set of the original Addams Family, which you were on, and you have specific memories from filming that television show that we all love.
Yeah, I was 7 years old when the series started, and I actually remember the first day Dad took me to the set. You know, that incredible living room with a conquistador and a suit of armor and a marlin with a leg sticking out, and that set was really unique.
And it was all painted black and white like you are today, right? Grayscale, just
well,
like on the TV?
You would think that. I mean, it looks black and white on TV, but that's not the way it works. The way a color looks on TV once it's photographed in black and white is a whole science. And I don't know, pink translates to some kind of gray, or they were all green, so they would have like green lipstick and weird colors, but in black and white on the screen, it turned out just to be great. So I remember walking onto that set, that fantastic living room with that grand staircase in the middle. And like an idiot, even though I knew Dad was working on the show, I thought, wow, what a great house. So I walk up the stairs, make sure nobody sees me. I walk up there and I find this door, and I think I'm gonna, walk into this bedroom and explore this house by myself. Of course, I open the door and there's nothing there, a couple of lights and some dust. And I go, oh yeah, that's right, this isn't real. But so fun nonetheless. I had so much fun on that set. The actors were great, the crew was great. Everybody got along so well. There was a lot of laughter. A lot of downtime because they would mess around a bit, but it just added to the whole fun nature of the thing.
So, of course, they gave your dad, because of his tall stature, the biggest dressing room, right?
Yeah, right. Well, this was Dad's first job in Hollywood, so he got the little closet behind the scenery. John Aston had a dressing room. You had to walk out of the soundstage, across the alley, up some stairs, into another room. And Carolyn Jones, who really was the star of all the actors when the series started, she had this fantastic dressing room right in the middle of the soundstage. But Dad's was the best, absolutely. My sister and I would sit in there and wait for the filming to start and watch that red light come on, because right next to Dad's dressing room was the donut cart. There's nothing better on a soundstage than the donut cart. So that red light would go off and we'd sneak out and we'd get our donuts and go back in the thing. And I do remember one time the director yelling, "Cut! There's some noise somewhere." And I'm sure it wasn't us.
Well, I love that. That's amazing. Very, very childlike of you to explore, of course. Were there any other, did you stick to the same stage of the Addams Family? Did you get to venture onto the rest of the lot?
Yeah, boy, back in those days, it was different. There was, obviously there was a guard at the gate when you come off, I think it was La Brea, and you go into that lot. But once you got on the lot, there was nothing. Maybe there was a guy walking around. We never saw him. Ken Weatherwax, who played Pugsley, was kind of my buddy when I would show up there. And when he was not filming, he and I used to skateboard around that lot. And next door to us was the Beverly Hillbillies. I remember going to that door. The door was unlocked. We walked in, and the set is all set up. The props are all out. We're walking around, checking everything out. But you know what the flip side is? In those days, we didn't mess with anything. It was just, that's the way it was. Across the alley was Mr. Ed. And I know there were a lot of other great shows. I don't remember now all of them, but I remember those two. And we had so much fun just roaming around those sets. Now, I don't think you can get within 20 yards without the FBI showing up. But
security,
that's the way it was then.
Well, you had mentioned the director and how your father improvised the iconic line. First of all, how dare he? His first Hollywood role, he's bringing dialogue to the set. I'm sure the director didn't necessarily appreciate that, but we all appreciate him for that.
No, he did not. Actually, the director gave him some direction before the audition, before the scene where he would audition, and told him they wanted the character played like the Charles Addams cartoons, which was standing up straight. I don't know if you remember the cartoons, but Lurch was like this and he was kind of like this, hence the word Lurch. And of course he had no lines, and when I forget which, Morticia pulls the rope and Lurch comes in, he's supposed to just stand there and kind of, they're looking for a look. Well, he came in and he said, "You rang." And what else did he do?
The rest is history. Well, in just a few minutes,
I'm sorry. One thing I think you were getting at is he told the director before he went out, "No, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to stand up straight." He didn't say he was going to say "you rang," but he said he was going to stand up straight in a dignified way. And Dad told me later, said the director said, "What are you talking about? This is your first job in Hollywood, your first audition. You're saying no to me? I'm telling you how to do the part." And yet he still did it that way and won everybody over immediately. Just great.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is Sean Cassidy, the son of Ted Cassidy, famous for his role as Lurch on the original Addams Family, which we're celebrating the 60th anniversary of. In just a few minutes, we're going to have a Q&A from the audience. So if you guys have any questions for Sean, what it was like growing up, definitely get those ready. We'll have a mic go around. But I've got a trivia question for you, the audience. Does anybody know the name of the actor who famously played the character Thing? The hand pops out of the box in the original Addams Family. The name of the actor that played Thing. Does anybody know?
Is that right? I thought it was out there.
All right, well, today...
Dad played Thing. And
Ted Cassidy. Surprise, surprise.
And he had this great, wonderful, big hand. And I remember Dad, my sister and I would watch. Dad would be at home in the early days of the series, and he would be in front of a mirror, and he'd figure out ways to get nuances and have that hand emote and kind of communicate in a way. It was wonderful, and I think he did a great job on the series. And back then they didn't have split screens, so when Dad and Thing were in the same scene, it was somebody else who was doing Thing. Sometimes it was John Astin, sometimes it was director, I heard sometimes it was like several different people. And if you're a fan of the show, if you take a good look, you can tell that that hand looks smaller and is not quite as expressive. But he loved that part. One thing I talk about a lot, and I don't know if we'll go into detail here, is that Dad kind of had a love-hate relationship with Lurch. It brought him fame, it brought him into Hollywood, it opened doors, but it wasn't the kind of role he wanted. To be honest, Thing was more the role he was interested in, because it wasn't a lumbering big oaf, which is kind of how Lurch was described when he first took it up. And he got to do things with it, be real creative, and love that story.
What role would you say was his dream role to play as a classically trained actor that he was?
Well, he did do some theater, and I imagine if he were here, he would indicate some of those. But the biggest smile I've ever seen on my dad's face in my life is a picture of him while doing Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid. He and George Roy Hill, the director, and Paul Newman and Robert Redford are talking, and they're all laughing. And Dad's smile is huge, and I can just tell it's the happiest he ever was in his career, because to him, that was more what he was interested in, real acting, the real big productions. And so he might include, I say that's it. He would probably pick some dinner theater in Santa Barbara or something, because he loved doing that too.
So you mentioned Butch Cassidy. What's the best story from that set as far as your dad's concerned?
Mark, have we talked before? Is this, have you heard?
I might have gotten the question sent.
My favorite story about it, they filmed Butch Cassidy in the Southwest, near Utah and Arizona, Kanab, the Vermilion Cliffs, that area, if you're familiar with it, that beautiful red rock area. And some of you may be familiar with the knife fight scene in Butch Cassidy. Rules? Knife fight? And so before they did that scene, Dad wrote me a letter. What was I, 10 or 11 years old? And he told me about the scene that they were gonna do, and that he and Paul talked about it. They're both professionals. They want to make this look as realistic as possible. So they came up with a plan, and they wrapped a pillow around Dad's thigh and tied it on. He wore his pants over that. So the plan was Paul was going to kick him, land on the pillow, and okay, it might ride up, and Dad may have to take one for the team, but at least, a lot of the impact would... Well, that's not the way it went down. When Paul kicked him, it was dead center. And that look of anguish on Dad's, Harvey Logan's face when he gets kicked in the knife fight, he told me in the letter, that was real. It really hurt. He felt that 3 days later. Well, that's a fun story.
That's true acting right there, a true professional.
That's right.
Well, I think we're going to begin to turn it over to the audience. If anybody has any questions for Sean Cassidy today, son of Lurch, thank you for joining us. We're here celebrating the life of Ted Cassidy on the 60th anniversary of the original Addams Family television. Got a question in the back right over here.
This good-looking young man has a question.
Yes, was your father in the Twilight Zone series, the Rod Serling?
No, I think you're thinking about the episode To Serve Man,
Yes.
which is one of the most popular episodes. No, that was Richard Keel. He's also the tall actor in Moonraker.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, that's who that was, yeah.
So what are some of the common misconceptions? Because thank you so much for that question. Definitely, I had the same question when I first met him.
It's a common one.
It's very common.
They're
And it's a
both very
perfect-
tall, so that's not unusual.
What are some of the other famous films, television series, voice acting that your father
He actually
has?
did most of his career was voiceover for commercials and cartoons. But McKenna's Gold, Going Coconuts with the Donnie and Marie Osmond. Star Trek, of course. Yes, early in his career, Star Trek.
Gotta talk about that.
He was Ruck in the episode What a Little Girl's Made Of, and he did the voice of the Gorn and of Blaylock. He and Gene Roddenberry were buddies, and he did some of those episodes. And they liked to play tricks on people. They had a lot of fun. One of the days the dad was there with Gene, they were in Gene's office, and Gene had just gotten a new tailor. He hadn't even met Gene yet, and he was going to come up to Gene's office and measure him for a suit. And Dad and Gene thought it would be funny. What if Dad was sitting behind the desk in the Ruck costume? And that's what he did. The tailor came in. It was just one of those eyes wide open, not a word was said for 5 seconds. And I think they led the poor guy on for a while, but then they let him in on it. But that was fun.
Amazing. Such a great sense of humor. I think that comedy also translated to a lot of his characters that very beloved in science fiction, pop culture as well.
Right.
Do we have any other questions from the audience? I'm full of them, so we'll continue. Maybe let's talk about the biography. First ever biography, just released within the last month. Author Christopher Cook, you had some writing and a lot of contribution as well as the foreword in that. You want to talk about the book?
A few years ago, a guy contacted me. He actually contacted my sister first, and she called me and said, Sean, there's this guy who I think he's a little nutty. He wants to write this book, and I don't know. My sister was a little more wondering about him. And I talked to him, and he's actually, Christopher Cook is his name. He's a well-published author, written a lot of books on different horror characters and projects. And he said he wanted to write this book about Dad, his early life and through Addams Family. And I helped him write that and got to write the foreword to it. And it's really fun. It has, it focuses a lot on Dad's early life and then on a lot of the beginning of the Addams Family and through the series. There's lots of stuff in there I did not know. They were very well researched and a lot of fun to read, and brings the 60s and Hollywood to life. Good read.
Yeah, he definitely did his research, and it's very entertaining. Well, We have here Sean Cassidy, the son of Ted Cassidy, famous for his role as Lurch, the original Addams Family. Taking a few more minutes, we've got any questions from the audience? We have our booth near the front, Son of Lurch. You could also find Sean at sonoflurch.com or at your local convention. Again, thank you for joining us at HorrorCon. I think we've got a question from the lovely lady in the front row.
Your father played in McKenna's Gold, and I understand that Julie Newmar was in there. Do you have any stories about her?
Julie Newmar.
Catwoman?
Oh boy. Oh boy.
Can I pause real quick?
Should I tell this one?
I need to give a little context while you think about what you're going to say. Ladies and gentlemen, Sean's wife, Christy Cassidy, coming with the grilling questions of
Yes.
meeting a Hollywood celebrity, hot and steamy encounter.
So I was 10 years old. Dad was working on McKenna's Gold with Gregory Peck and Omar Sharif and Julie Newmar and Telly Savalas. Really just a star-packed Western. And my mother and I drove out there, and one day it was on location, one day on the set, it is announced all the non-essential people, please leave, because Julie Newmar, Catwoman in Batman, one of the most attractive women, not including you, baby, okay, in the world, is going to be doing her nude swimming in the lake scene. So everybody out of here doesn't need this. So I left, and all I could think about is, what is going on over there? I'm 10 or 11 years old. That was all kind of new territory. And a little while later, it is announced, all clear, you can come back on the set. I'm walking on the set, and Dad walks over to me and says, Sean, Julie would like to meet you. What? And I'm like shaking now. This is Catwoman. What? Why does she want to? She just wants to meet you. So we walked over. And as I'm walking over toward the trailer, every crew member, everybody anywhere near me is looking like, what is going on? He's walking, because she had just walked by, wearing a towel basically, and walked back. And
They were so jealous of you.
Oh my God! I'm now jealous of me because I didn't know what I had then. And so I knock on the door, and Julie Newmar answers the door wearing a G-string and a towel. Okay, and she sits down, and this is, a trailer. So I close the door, and I'm about as close as to Mark here
Ooh la la.
to her, and I don't know what to say. And then that's about as racy as the story gets, because after that, she was, wonderful and
How many of your
appropriate.
friends believed you on the schoolyard the next day?
Oh yeah, no, she was great. But oh my gosh, I felt things I wasn't able to identify until a few years later.
So that's interesting.
Wasn't sure
you
what was
mentioned
going
that.
on there.
Thank you, it's okay. So you mentioned Julie Newmar, familiar with your father. Your father had good looks, obviously, had a great career. Was he popular with the ladies? What was his kind of outlook on romance?
He was popular with the lady. He was a good-looking guy. He was a strong guy. But I tell you, he had only eyes for his wife. That was it. She was everything. I have the same relationship with mine. I know I got that from my dad, and I love that. But I will be doing this story.
I might be searching for dirt if there is any. You got to give it to us. We're here.
Dad has a story too. So Julie invited him up for dinner, and I guess there are parts of the story I need to skip over.
Well, we'll be at the booth after this. Son of Lurch in the front, if you guys would like, selling T-shirts and telling the rest of these stories.
Oh, that's right. I'll leave that part out. But at some point, they're sitting on the couch, and after all the stuff I'm not mentioning, Dad pulls out his wallet and shows to Julie pictures of his wife and his kids. And as Dad told the story, Julie then went back on the couch, kind of laid back and said, well, you'll figure out what you want to do. And not too much later, he left, and someone that time after told me that story, and he's a hero to me for that, maybe more than anything. How do you deny Catwoman? I'm still not quite sure how that happens.
Only Ted Cassidy. So
yeah.
nothing controversial. What's like the most controversial thing that maybe is on the internet, whether it's true or
Yeah,
not?
you know, it's funny, there isn't a lot. He was a genuinely nice guy and charitable guy and fun to work with on the set, so there isn't much. The only thing I would say, and it is out there a bit, is that Dad really did want to be taken seriously as an actor. He was classically trained, did Shakespeare, wanted to play Cyrano de Bergerac. That was the kind of actor he saw himself, and yet he would get cast in these, you know, big oafish roles.
Well, I hate to bring it up, but he was taken from us way too early. Died in 1979 at the age of
46.
46.
Yeah.
And don't want to get too much into that, but I do know that there is some misconception around his death and what he died of. You want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, so the story I was just telling before, he was often mistaken for Richard Keel, and I think I mentioned this. And he didn't think, just as he didn't think much of his roles when he played in Lumbering Oath, he didn't think much of Richard Keel's roles either. So when he would be mistaken for Richard Keel, he would push back on that in a way that I think sort of hurt Richard's feelings. And I'm sure Dad regretted that, but he died before he could do anything about it. I know I felt bad about it and actually talked to Richard on the phone once about that. And I think we were good with that. But, you know, that kind of brings to focus the tall man's curse, which is that a lot of people seem to feel that if you're tall, there's something wrong. So there are a lot of stories out there about how my father died of acromegaly, which they also call, you know, gigantism, giantism. Something's wrong with your hormone balance if you're very big. It's not true. Dad didn't have that. I know that several years ago I went to a new doctor. I'm 6'6" now, maybe I was 6'7" then. And I walked in, this brand new doctor, barely even said hello to me. He picks up a paper and starts filling it out, and I look over and he writes down acromegaly for me. And I looked at him and I go, what does that mean? And he says, he says, why do you think I have that? Well, you're 6'7". He says, so? You think everybody in the NBA has that? What is wrong with you? So even I noticed at my inferior height that that was a thing, and it's unfortunate. It's actually one of the reasons I got started doing this, kind of promoting and keeping alive Dad's legacy, was to counteract that, because that, I don't know why it bothers me, but it does, and it wasn't true, and people assumed it, and glad I could set the record straight with you all.
Well, we thank you so much for being here with us today again, celebrating the life, the legacy, and the lore of Ted Cassidy on the 60th anniversary of Addams Family. I think we have one more question from the audience right here.
I was just gonna ask, moving from a small town east, like kind of like what I did, to here is a very big move. Do you ever have any regrets or any setbacks that you'd like to talk about?
Me personally? Well, we moved from Dallas to Santa Monica when I was 6. So while I remember Dallas and a little bit of Pensacola, Florida, where I was born, I'm an LA boy. So not really. I did do some college back east and some work back east. I've kind of been around. There's no better place in the world than Southern California, I'll tell you that.
Ladies and gentlemen, it's been an amazing time. I think we've got one more question.
Is it one in the back there? No, okay.
Well, thank you again so much for joining us. Ladies and gentlemen, Sean Cassidy.
Thank you guys, thank you much. And I know I'm the son of, but thank you for your love of my father. I appreciate that.
Thank you very much. Thank you to HorrorCon.